Why do baseball pitchers seem to get TOS at a higher rate? So let's understand that the data on baseball pitchers is a little bit out there. There's a lot of suspense and a lot of unknown. First of all, from the little bit of literature that's out there, and this is the lay press, but also a few papers, we know that baseball pitchers do not uniformly get better after surgery. Granted, they're elite athletes and trying to maintain that elite edge may be tough. We don't know how long they have TOS before they go to surgery. And honestly, we don't even know if they have the correct diagnosis of TOS when they do go to surgery. If you've worked with professional athletes, and I've had the privilege to do so occasionally, they are protected by a whole coterie of managers and agents, and everybody wants a shot at these guys or gals. And so they tend to channel down to very few docs, the team docs and the team trainers all are a small circle. And we've had the privilege to speak with some of these people, but it is a narrow field with especially narrow thoughts on how to get these players better and back up and playing. Of course, they're very valuable assets for their team. So time is important. You can't take a year off very easily without affecting your team. So there's a paper written by Thompson et al. A while ago. I talk about that one frequently. I don't think that does really help a lot with understanding how TOS helps patients. They took pitchers, and after their numbers fell off, they eventually got to surgery. Now, mind you, these pitchers, because they're so valuable, no one wants to put them on the DL, and no one wants to take them off the playing field. So a lot of them struggle through it. They always have aches and pains. Look, they're pushing themselves to the peak of performance. They're probably icing down the arm for hours after each pitching start. So when they have aches and pains and it's slow onset, they probably don't go to see a surgeon right away. So in this particular paper, they got the surgeons got the TOS patients. They weren't diagnosed with imaging, but by a regular clinical exam, and we know how fraught that can be. And this was after their performance had dropped off. That's when the pitchers finally go and start considering surgery, when their numbers drop off. So their numbers dropped off, they had surgery. The numbers were compared before and after the surgery. And they showed in several of the pitchers, this is a small study, that their numbers hadn't changed. Now, to me, that's not effective. You want to see their numbers go back up to where they were, not just before the study, but before they had symptoms. So we don't know how long they had TOS. We don't know who diagnosed them because let's face it, we've all been through this. If you're watching this and you're a TOS patient, you know how hard it is to get a diagnosis. So a lot of these baseball pitchers may not have been diagnosed. And the longer you go without a diagnosis, the harder it is to recover, especially when you're at the edge, the performance peak and the envelope there. So there's not a lot of data. There's a bunch of assumptions out there. The axillary artery crosses from the neck and chest into the arm. And when you're in the full pitching position, that artery can be spread across the head of the humerus right at the shoulder here. So the artery can be stretched. And so some people believe that that creates TOS. But there's very few cases that I know of with pitchers getting arterial TOS. They're much more likely to get neurogenic TOS like the rest of us. And if they're losing, even subtly losing sensation in their fingers, they're probably losing their control. Just think of how precise these guys have to be throwing a ball 90 miles an hour or greater. And then having the ball come off your fingertips and directing it to a tiny spot you want it to go to 60 feet away. So I would bet that if we really looked at it and we went back, we'd find these pitchers losing some of their control as an early sign. Nonetheless, the data is short on these guys because there's such a small population, but it brings up the fact that other athletes who use their arms overhead, such as rock climbers, get TOS, and volleyball players, if they're spiking the ball, they've got their arm way over their head with maximal effort. Swimmers do it to both sides. We know that venous TOS, Paget-Schroeder disease, occurs more commonly in some of these young athletic swimmers. So any overhead athletic sport with exertion in that position is going to expose you to a higher risk of TOS. And I would say that while neurogenic still is the most common, venous TOS probably becomes more common in those athletes than in the general population. So we have had the privilege of scanning a few high-level baseball pitchers, high minors and major league, after they've had surgery. And what we tend to see is post-surgical changes that include inflammation of the brachial plexus. And that's probably post-surgical because it's the particular location we find it in, and it's so asymmetric from the other side. Even though they're using this one side to pitch, I've never seen a study, and I've never seen a case myself of an overhead athlete who had diffuse inflammation of the brachial plexus or of large parts of it. So there are a lot of reasons why baseball pitchers should get TOS. Right now, we have a paucity of data. I will say that we're lucky enough to have some very interesting people actively working in the field because they want these athletes to get through this with minor interruption of their careers. So stay tuned on that one. Hopefully, over the next few years, when we're making progress on some of these high-end baseball pitchers.